Margaret and her 10-year-old daughter Sophie returned from a short nature walk at their family camping site in the remote Colorado wilderness to find everything vanished. Her parents, her brother Derek and his wife Amanda, their 2 kids, all 3 tents, the cars, the food supply, the camping gear all gone. No cell service, only a handwritten note on the folding table remains. "This is for the best, trust me." Signed by her mother. Margaret's hands shake as she reads it again. Sophie tugging at her sleeve, asking where everyone went. I stood there staring at that note until the words blurred together. My brain couldn't process what my eyes were seeing. The folding table sat exactly where Wed left it 2 hours ago, but everything else had been erased like Wed never been here at all. The clearing where Derek's massive tent had stood showed only flattened grass. The fire pit Wed built together yesterday held nothing but cold ashes scattered by wind. "Mom, where's Grandma?" Sophie pulled harder on my sleeve, her voice climbing toward panic. "Where did everybody go?" I forced my voice to stay calm even as my heart hammered against my ribs. "I don't know, sweetie. Let me look around." I walked the entire perimeter of our campsite, calling out their names. "Mom! Dad! Derek!" My voice echoed off the pine trees and came back to me empty. I checked behind every tree thick enough to hide a person, thinking maybe this was some kind of joke. Derek had always had a cruel sense of humor. Maybe he'd convinced everyone to hide, to teach me some kind of lesson about something. But the tire tracks in the dirt road told a different story. 3 sets of tracks, fresh and deep, leading back toward the main forest road. I followed them for maybe a quarter mile before they disappeared onto the packed gravel. They'd driven away, all of them, together. I checked my phone for the 100th time. No signal. We were 40 miles from the nearest town of Cedar Ridge, deep in the San Juan National Forest. We'd driven for 3 hours yesterday to reach this remote spot that Dad said was perfect for getting away from everything. Now those words felt sinister. The sun was already dropping toward the mountain peaks. I glanced at my watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. We'd left for our walk around 2. In 2.5 hours they'd packed up everything and left. That took planning. That took coordination. This wasn't spontaneous. I returned to Sophie, who sat on the ground next to the table, her small backpack clutched to her chest. "Mom, I'm scared." "I know, baby." "Me too." I knelt beside her and pulled her close. "But we're going to figure this out, okay? Let's see what we have." We inventoried our supplies with growing dread. Sophie's backpack contained 1 half-full water bottle, 1 granola bar, a flashlight with weak batteries, and her favorite book. I had my phone with no signal, my wallet with $63 in cash, my car keys that unlocked a car that wasn't here, and the light jacket I'd been wearing. That was it. The temperature was already dropping. It was early October, and nights in the Colorado mountains could dip below freezing. I zipped my jacket and wrapped it around Sophie as best I could. "Are we going to sleep outside?" Sophie's voice was small. "Just for tonight. Tomorrow we'll walk out and find help." I tried to sound confident, but my mind was racing through logistics. 40 miles. With a 10-year-old child. No food except 1 granola bar. No proper gear. We found a large pine tree with low-hanging branches that created a small sheltered space underneath. I gathered pine needles to create a cushion on the ground, remembering camping trips from my childhood when Dad taught me basic survival skills. The irony wasn't lost on me. As darkness fell, Sophie and I huddled together. I gave her the granola bar even though she wanted to share it. "Eat it all, sweetie. You need your energy." I wasn't hungry anyway. My stomach was twisted into knots. My mind wouldn't stop spinning through the day, searching for clues I'd missed. Mom had seemed strange that morning. Shed hugged me extra tight before Sophie and I left for our walk, and Id noticed tears in her eyes. Id asked if she was okay, and Shed just nodded and said, "I love you so much, Margaret. Remember that." Id thought she was being sentimental. Now I wondered if it was goodbye. Derek had barely spoken to me all weekend. Had been cold since Id moved back in with our parents 6 months ago after my divorce. Had made several comments about me freeloading even though I was actively job hunting and helping with household expenses from my savings. Amanda, his wife, had given me odd looks all weekend. Pitying looks, I realized now. Like she felt sorry for me but couldn't or wouldn't say why. The pieces didn't fit together into anything that made sense. Why would they leave us? What did Mom's note mean? "This is for the best"? Sophie finally fell asleep against my chest, shivering despite being wrapped in my jacket. I held her tight, listening to every sound in the forest. Every crack of a branch made me tense. Every animal sound made my heart race. I didn't sleep at all. Just before dawn, when the sky was turning gray, I heard it. The distant rumble of engines. My heart leaped. They'd come back! They'd realized their mistake, whatever this was, and they'd come back for us. Sophie, wake up. I shook her gently. I hear cars. We scrambled out from under the tree and ran toward the sound. My legs were stiff from the cold night, but adrenaline pushed me forward. The sound was coming from the forest road, maybe half a mile away. We crashed through brush and dodged around trees, Sophie running behind me. I could see the road ahead through the trees. I could see taillights. Wait! Stop! We're here! I screamed at the top of my lungs, waving my arms frantically. Sophie was crying and running, calling out for her grandma. I burst onto the road just in time to see 3 vehicles disappearing around a bend. My father's blue pickup truck, Derek's black SUV, Mom's silver sedan. I could see them clearly in the early morning light. I ran after them, screaming until my throat was raw. Sophie sobbing behind me. The vehicles sped up and disappeared. I stood in the middle of that empty dirt road, my legs shaking, unable to breathe. They'd come back. They'd driven right past the area where they'd left us. And they'd driven away again. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was intentional. My family had come back to make sure we were still here, still abandoned, and then they'd left us again. They wanted us to die out here. I collapsed onto the dirt road, my whole body shaking. Sophie wrapped her arms around me from behind, and we cried together as the sun rose over the mountains. When I had no tears left, I pulled myself together because I had to. Sophie needed me to be strong. We're going to walk out? I told her, wiping her face with my sleeve. We're going to follow this road all the way to town, and we're going to get help. Okay. Sophie nodded, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Okay, Mom. We started walking. The forest road wound endlessly through pine trees and aspens, climbing up hills and down into valleys. My feet ached in my hiking boots. Sophie's legs were much shorter than mine, and she struggled to keep up. I held her hand and tried to keep a steady pace. By midday, we were both desperately thirsty. The granola bar was long gone. Wed passed the water bottle back and forth, taking tiny sips, but now it was empty. When we heard the sound of running water, I nearly cried with relief. We scrambled down a small embankment to a clear stream. I knew we shouldn't drink untreated water, but what choice did we have? I let Sophie drink first, cupping my hands to bring water to her mouth. Then I drank deeply myself. It was ice cold and tasted like minerals and pine. It was the best water I'd ever had. We rested by the stream for an hour. My mind kept circling back to the same questions. Why? What had I done? Was this about money? About my divorce? About living with my parents temporarily? I thought about my ex-husband, Jason. Our divorce had been finalized 6 months ago after 3 years of his cheating and lying. The settlement had been messy. Head fought me on everything, especially the life insurance policy Head taken out on me during our marriage. It was for $500,000, meant to protect Sophie if something happened to me. The divorce judge had ordered me to keep the policy active as part of our agreement, to ensure Sophie's financial security. I'd changed the beneficiary to Sophie immediately. But now I wondered, could someone have changed it back? Could this be about that money? We continued walking until sunset. Wed covered maybe 8 miles, but the road seemed endless. There were no cars, no people, no signs of civilization, just wilderness in every direction. That night, we slept under another tree. I gave Sophie the last of our water. My mouth was so dry I could barely swallow. On the second day, Sophie developed a fever. By afternoon, she had diarrhea from the stream water. I carried her when she couldn't walk anymore, her small body burning hot against my chest. I was terrified. We were miles from help, and my baby was getting sicker. Just before sunset, we found it. An old hunting shelter, barely standing, hidden about 100 feet off the road. The roof sagged and the walls had gaps, but it was shelter. I carried Sophie inside and laid her on the wooden floor. I ventured back out as darkness fell, desperate to find anything that might help. In the dying light, I spotted some wild berries on a bush near the shelter. I had no idea if they were safe to eat, but Sophie needed something in her stomach. I ate one first, waiting to see if I felt sick. After an hour, I felt okay. So I gave Sophie a handful. She ate them weakly and fell asleep. I sat against the wall, watching her chest rise and fall, praying she'd be okay. My mind was clearer now, sharp with hunger and fear. I thought about Derek, about the way Head looked at me over the past 6 months. Head always been competitive, always resentful when I got attention from our parents. But this was murder. On the third day, Sophie's fever broke slightly. She was still weak, but she could sit up and drink when I brought her water from a nearby puddle. I explored the shelter more carefully in the daylight. That's when I found the loose floorboard. Underneath it was a small stash, 3 cans of soup, 2 bottles of water, a box of matches, a knife, and a blanket. My hands trembled as I pulled them out. Someone had been using this shelter recently. The cans weren't rusty, the water bottles were modern, and the matches were dry. Then I saw the paper, crumpled at the bottom of the hiding spot. I smoothed it out, and my blood ran cold. It was a printed email, torn and partially damaged by moisture, but I could read enough. Derek, regarding Margaret's life insurance policy as discussed, beneficiary has been changed to you as secondary, with your children as tertiary. Once she is declared legally dead, typically 7 years but can be expedited to 6 months with evidence of death in dangerous circumstances, you will receive the full amount of $500,000. Estimated timeline. The rest was torn away, but I didn't need to read more. My own brother had planned this. Had changed my life insurance beneficiary somehow. And now he was waiting for me to die so he could collect $500,000. I sat there in that dirty shelter, holding that piece of paper, and something inside me shifted. The fear and confusion burned away, replaced by cold, focused rage. Derek wanted me dead. He was waiting for me to die out here. I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction. I read that torn email at least 20 times, memorizing every word. My hands weren't shaking anymore. They were steady as I carefully folded the paper and tucked it into my pocket. Evidence. I needed to preserve it. The full picture was coming together now, piece by terrible piece. During my marriage, Jason had insisted on taking out that large life insurance policy on me. At the time, Head framed it as responsible planning for Sophie's future. After the divorce, the judge had ordered me to maintain the policy, with Sophie as the sole beneficiary until she turned 18. But someone had changed it. Somehow, Derek had gotten access to my policy and changed the beneficiary structure. As a minor, Sophie couldn't directly receive the funds without a living parent or legal guardian. If I died, Derek must have gotten himself listed as Sophie's guardian and secondary beneficiary. The policy would go to him, $500,000. That's what my life was worth to my brother. I thought about the past 6 months, about Derek's increasing hostility. Head made comments about me being a burden on our parents. Head questioned why I was taking so long to find a new job. Head suggested more than once that Sophie and I should move into a smaller apartment somewhere far away. Id thought he was just being his usual judgmental self. Now I realized Head been setting the stage, making it seem like I was unstable, struggling, maybe even suicidal, so that when I disappeared in the wilderness, people would think it was tragic but somehow not entirely surprising. And our parents, I couldn't square their involvement with the people I thought I knew. Dad with his gentle hands teaching me to fish, Mom with her warm hugs and constant worries about whether I was eating enough. Had Derek manipulated them somehow, lied to them, or were they willing participants in their own daughter's murder? The questions burned, but I pushed them aside. Right now, I needed to focus on survival and getting Sophie to safety. I opened one of the cans of soup, chicken noodle, and fed it to Sophie slowly. She ate half of it before her stomach couldn't take any more. I finished the rest, the first real food I'd had in 3 days. The salt and protein made me feel almost human again. Over the next day, we stayed in the shelter while Sophie regained her strength. I gave her the blanket and the bottled water. I used the matches to start a small fire in a cleared area outside, keeping it going with dry wood. The warmth helped Sophie's recovery. I taught her how to tend the fire safely, how to add wood slowly, how to make sure it didn't spread. She watched me with serious eyes, this child who'd been forced to grow up so fast over the past few days. "Mom," she said on the 4th night, "are we going to be okay?" I looked at my daughter, this brave girl who hadn't complained once even though she was sick and scared and had every right to fall apart. Yes, baby. We are. I promise you. And I meant it. I wasn't going to let Derek win. I wasn't going to let my daughter become an orphan so my brother could get rich. We were getting out of this forest, and then I was going to make sure Derek paid for what he'd done. I found an old Forest Service map in the shelter on the 5th day, tucked behind a broken shelf. It was water damaged and partially illegible, but I could make out enough. We were in the San Juan National Forest, and according to the map, there was a fire watchtower about 6 miles northeast of our current position. If it was still operational, there might be a radio or emergency supplies. I studied the map carefully, memorizing the landmarks. A rocky outcropping shaped like a bear's head. A small lake, a steep ravine. If I could find these features, I could navigate to the tower. On the morning of the 6th day, Sophie was strong enough to walk. Her fever was gone, though she'd lost weight and had dark circles under her eyes. I packed the remaining can of soup, the knife, the matches, and the water bottle in Sophie's backpack. I kept the torn email in my pocket, protected in a plastic bag I'd found in the shelter. We were ready to move. Before we left, I made markers at the shelter using rocks arranged in an arrow pattern, pointing northeast toward the tower. If search parties came, which I doubted, at least there would be a trail. More likely, the markers were for my own peace of mind, a way of saying we'd been here, we'd survived this far, and we were still fighting. Where are we going, Mom? Sophie asked as we set out through the dense forest. To a place where we can get help. A tower where people used to watch for forest fires. It's on this map, and we're going to find it. The terrain was brutal. We climbed steep inclines where I had to push Sophie from behind. We navigated around thick undergrowth that grabbed at our clothes. We crossed streams by hopping on rocks, Sophie holding tight to my hand. My feet were covered in blisters that had burst and reformed. Sophie's legs were scratched and bruised. But we kept moving. On the afternoon of the 6th day, we found the Bearhead Rock Formation. Seeing it exactly where the map indicated gave me a surge of hope. We were on the right path. That night, we made camp under a rocky overhang. I used the matches to start a fire, and we heated the last can of soup in its tin, holding it over the flames with a stick. We shared it between us, and it tasted better than any meal I'd ever had at a fancy restaurant. Sophie fell asleep quickly, exhausted. I sat watching the fire, thinking about what would happen when we got out. I'd go straight to the police. I had Derek's text message still on my phone, assuming I could ever get a signal again. I had the torn email. I had the original note my mother had left. It might be enough for an investigation, at least. But even if it wasn't, even if Derek had covered his tracks too well, I'd still survived. That alone would ruin whatever plan had made. On the morning of day 8, we reached the fire watchtower. I saw it through the trees and felt such relief I nearly collapsed. It stood on a hill, a tall wooden structure with a small enclosed cabin at the top, reached by a zigzag staircase. We climbed the hill, Sophie practically running despite her exhaustion, but as we got closer, my hope deflated. The tower was clearly abandoned. The windows were boarded up, the door padlocked. Graffiti covered the lower walls. A sign read, "Decommissioned 2003, no trespassing." The map had been over 20 years old. The tower hadn't been operational in 2 decades. I sat down on the bottom step and put my head in my hands. I'd been so sure this would save us. It dragged Sophie 6 miles through brutal terrain for nothing. Mom. Sophie's voice was small. It's okay. We can find another way. I looked up at my 10-year-old daughter, standing there dirty and thin, and scared but still trying to comfort me. In that moment, I felt like the child, and she was the adult. You're right, I said, standing up. We can find another way. We will find another way. I looked at the padlock. It was old and rusty. I pulled out the knife from the backpack and wedged it into the lock mechanism, twisting and prying. After 10 minutes of work, the lock broke open. The door swung inward, and we climbed into the tower's lower level. It was dim and musty, filled with old equipment and debris, but we climbed the stairs anyway, all the way to the top cabin. The view took my breath away. From this height, I could see for miles in every direction, mountains, forests, valleys, and far to the west, I could see something that made my heart race. A thin line cutting through the forest, too straight to be natural. A road, a highway. Inside the cabin, there was no radio, no phone, nothing electronic at all. but there were supplies that previous trespassers had left behind. More canned food, a sleeping bag, a first aid kit, and most importantly, another map. This one was more recent and more detailed. I spread it out on the dusty floor and studied it carefully. The highway I'd seen from the window was marked clearly. Colorado State Highway 160, which connected multiple towns. And about 8 miles west of the tower, there was a marked rest stop with facilities and a phone. 8 miles. We could do 8 miles. We'd already come so far. But as I stared at that map, planning our route, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Voices. Coming from outside, at the base of the tower. I crept to the window and looked down. 2 people were below, a man and a woman in their 50s, wearing plain clothes and hiking boots. They had backpacks and walkie-talkies. They were searching the area systematically, looking behind trees and rocks. The man spoke into his walkie-talkie. Nothing yet, but there are fresh footprints leading up here. The woman pulled something from her pocket. I found a pair of old binoculars in the cabin and focused on what she was holding. It was a photograph. Even from this distance, I could make out who was in it. Me and Sophie. These weren't park rangers. These weren't search and rescue. These were people Derek had hired to make sure we never made it out alive. I clamped my hand over Sophie's mouth and pulled her away from the window, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might burst. She looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, but she didn't make a sound. My brave girl understood without me having to say a word. We crouched below the window line, and I put my finger to my lips. Sophie nodded. I could hear the people below talking, their voices drifting up through the broken boards. The tracks definitely come up this way, the man said. Boss said they should be dead by now, but we need confirmation. 7 days in the wilderness with no gear, the woman replied. If they're not dead, they're close. Let's check the tower and then sweep south. I heard footsteps on the wooden stairs. They were coming up. My eyes darted around the cabin, looking for somewhere to hide. But there was nowhere. The space was completely open except for some broken furniture. Then I noticed the sleeping bag in the corner. I grabbed it and threw it over Sophie, making it look like just another pile of debris. I positioned myself behind the door, knife in hand, praying they wouldn't look too carefully. The footsteps reached the top. The door creaked open. The man's voice said, "Just another trashed fire tower. Nobody's been here in years by the look of it." "Check anyway," the woman said. He stepped inside. I held my breath, pressing myself flat against the wall. He walked across the cabin, his boots crunching on debris. He looked out the window at the view, then turned back. His eyes swept right past where Sophie was hidden under the sleeping bag, right past where I stood frozen behind the door. He seemed satisfied. "Clear," he called down. "Let's move on. They probably went south toward the river." He left, his footsteps descending. I stayed absolutely still, counting to 100, then 200. Sophie didn't move either. Finally, after what felt like hours but was probably 20 minutes, I crept to the window and looked down. They were gone, heading south through the trees, just as the man had said. I pulled the sleeping bag off Sophie, and we held each other, both shaking. That had been too close. Derek wasn't just waiting for us to die of exposure. Had sent people to hunt us down. My phone suddenly vibrated in my pocket, making me jump. I pulled it out and saw 1 bar of signal had appeared, probably because of the tower's height. A text message loaded, and my stomach turned to ice. It was from Derek. "Stop trying. No one's coming. This is what you deserve." I quickly took a screenshot before the signal disappeared again. More evidence, but the message confirmed what I already knew. Derek was monitoring somehow. He knew we were still alive. He probably had people watching the main roads, maybe even tracking my phone when it briefly connected to towers. I turned off my phone completely to save the battery and prevent any tracking. We needed to be smarter than him. "Mom, what do we do?" Sophie whispered. I looked at the map again, thinking strategically. Derek would expect us to head for the highway and the rest stop, the obvious route to civilization. He'd have people watching, but the map showed something else. A small rural road about 5 miles northwest, much less traveled but still eventually leading to a town. "We're going to go a different way," I told Sophie. "A way they won't expect." Before we left the tower, I did something I'd learned from my father on camping trips years ago. I created a false trail. I used a torn piece of fabric from my jacket and tied it to a tree branch pointing south, the direction the hunters had gone. I scuffed the ground to make obvious footprints heading that way. Then I carefully covered our real trail heading northwest, using pine branches to sweep away our tracks. It took an extra hour, but it might save our lives. We set out northwest as the sun began to set on day 8. The terrain was even rougher in this direction, with fewer game trails and thicker undergrowth. But that was good. It meant fewer people came this way. It meant we were less likely to run into Derek's hired hunters. That night, we made camp in a dense thicket of bushes that hid us completely from view. I didn't risk a fire. We ate cold, canned food from the tower supplies and drank water from a stream. It filtered through my shirt, not ideal but better than nothing. Sophie whispered in the darkness. "Mom, why does Uncle Derek want to hurt us? How do you explain greed to a 10-year-old? How do you tell your child that her uncle values money more than her life? Some people make very bad choices when they want something badly enough," I said carefully. "Your Uncle Derek made the worst choice possible, but he's not going to win. We're not going to let him." "I miss Grandma," Sophie said, her voice breaking. "Do you think she knows what Uncle Derek did?" That was the question that haunted me. Did my parents know? Were they part of it? Or had Derek manipulated them somehow? "I don't know, baby, but we're going to find out. And if Grandma didn't know, if she thought we were safe, then well, help her understand what really happened." "Okay." Sophie nodded against my chest and eventually fell asleep. I stayed awake again, listening to every sound, the knife within easy reach. On the morning of day 9, we pushed hard toward the rural road. My feet were a mess of blisters and blood, but I didn't care anymore. The pain was just background noise. Sophie was limping too, but she never complained. She just held my hand and kept walking. By early afternoon, I could hear cars in the distance. Actual cars, on an actual road. We were so close. We approached carefully, staying hidden in the tree line. This was a small 2-lane road, much quieter than the highway would be. A car passed every 10 or 15 minutes. There were no buildings in sight, no rest stops, just road cutting through wilderness. I was trying to decide our next move when I saw it. A small wooden sign nailed to a tree. Cedar Ridge, 12 miles. We were only 12 miles from the nearest town. We could walk that in half a day. But then Sophie tugged on my sleeve and pointed. Further down the road, maybe a quarter-mile away, there was a vehicle parked on the shoulder. A truck. And leaning against it, smoking a cigarette, was a figure I recognized even from this distance. Derek. My brother had positioned himself on this road too. He was covering every possible route out. He was checking them himself now, desperate, because 10 days had passed and we should be dead, but he wasn't sure. He needed to see our bodies or he couldn't claim Wed died. The insurance company would investigate. He'd be exposed. Sophie and I crouched behind a fallen log, watching him. He paced back and forth, checking his phone, smoking cigarette after cigarette. He looked stressed. Good. He should be stressed. His plan was falling apart, but we were trapped. The road was our only way to town in any reasonable time frame, and Derek was guarding it. We sat there for over an hour, watching, waiting for him to leave, but he didn't leave. He made phone calls. He ate a sandwich from his truck. He kept vigil like he had all the time in the world. The sun was starting to sink again. Day 9 was almost over. We couldn't spend another night in the woods, not this close to rescue. Sophie was at the end of her strength. I could see it in her face, in the way she struggled to keep her eyes open. I was trying to figure out how to cross the road without Derek seeing us when I heard the rumble of a large engine. A semi-truck was coming down the road, the first big vehicle I'd seen on this route. Derek heard it too. He straightened up, flicked away his cigarette, and put on what I recognized as his concerned citizen face. The truck slowed down, probably because Derek had stepped partially into the road, waving. The truck pulled over in front of Derek's vehicle. The driver's door opened, and a woman climbed out, older, maybe early 60s, wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. This was our chance. While Derek was talking to the truck driver, distracted, Sophie and I could make a run for it across the road and flag down the next vehicle. Or maybe even approach the truck driver ourselves and ask for help before Derek could spin his lies. "Sophie," I whispered. "When I say go, we run to that truck driver. We tell her we need help. Don't stop no matter what, understand?" Sophie nodded, her small face set with determination. I watched Derek. He was gesturing, saying something to the truck driver. She had her back to us, facing him. This was as good as it would get. Go, I whispered. We burst from the trees and ran across the road. My legs screamed in protest, but adrenaline pushed me forward. Sophie ran beside me, her hand in mine. Derek saw us when we were halfway across. His face went from shock to rage to calculated calm in the space of 2 seconds. "Sophie!" he called out, his voice full of false relief. "Margaret!" Oh, thank God. We reached the truck driver just as Derek started toward us. Sophie grabbed onto the woman's arm. "Please help us. Please call 911. The truck driver looked down at Sophie in surprise, then at me. I was breathing hard, probably looked wild and desperate. "Please," I gasped. "My brother, he left us in the forest to die. We've been out here for 10 days. Please help us." Derek reached us, his face the picture of concern. "Margaret, Sophie, we've been searching everywhere. You wandered off and we've been so worried." His acting was perfect. If I didn't know better, I'd believe him myself. "He's lying," I screamed. "He left us there on purpose. He wants us dead for the insurance money." The truck driver, whose name tag read Carol, looked between us, confusion clear on her face. She pulled out her phone. "I'm calling the police." "Yes, please do," Derek said smoothly. "My sister has been through a terrible ordeal. She's clearly in shock. She got separated from our camping group and hasn't had food or water. She needs medical attention." "That's not true." I pulled out my phone with shaking hands. "I have a text message from him. He told me to stop trying, that no one was coming." Derek's mask slipped for just a second, a flash of panic crossing his face. But he recovered quickly. "You've been in the woods for 10 days. You're dehydrated, probably hypothermic. You're not thinking clearly." Carol had 911 on the line now. "Yes, I need police and an ambulance. I'm on highway." She checked the marker sign. "Rural Route 47, about 12 miles outside Cedar Ridge. There's a family situation here. A woman and child who appear to be in distress." "Tell them Derek Thompson planned this," I said desperately. "Tell them to check the life insurance policy. Tell them there's a note he made my mother write." Derek's face hardened. The mask was falling away now. "You were always the weak one, Margaret. Always needing Mom and Dad to take care of you. Always taking what should have been mine. You don't deserve their love. You don't deserve that money. You don't deserve any of it." The truth was spilling out of him now, in front of Carol, on a phone call that was being recorded by 911 dispatch. But Derek didn't seem to care anymore. He was too angry, too desperate. "It was supposed to be simple," he hissed. "You and Sophie would die of exposure. It would be tragic but explainable. An accident. But you had to survive. You had to ruin everything." He took a step toward me, and there was something in his eyes that terrified me. Had come too far to give up now. He was going to finish this, witness or not. Carol stepped between us, a surprisingly solid presence for a woman in her 60s. "Back off, son." But Derek reached into his jacket, and I saw the outline of something I recognized. A gun. Before he could pull it out, before any of us could react, 3 police cars came around the bend, sirens wailing, moving fast. They hadn't been dispatched by Carol's 911 call. They'd already been on their way. The cars screeched to a stop, officers jumping out with weapons drawn. "Derek Thompson, step away from them. Hands where we can see them." Derek froze, his hand still inside his jacket. For a moment, I thought he was going to do something stupid, go out in a blaze of violence rather than face justice, but then his shoulders sagged, and he pulled his empty hands out, raising them slowly. An officer rushed forward and handcuffed him while others secured the scene. A detective approached me, an older woman with kind eyes. "Margaret Thompson." I nodded, unable to speak. "We've been looking for you," she said gently. "Your mother came to the station last night. She confessed everything." Wait. Let me recalculate the story structure. I realize I've been following the outline too closely without properly developing each section to reach the full word count. Let me continue with proper expansion while maintaining the story flow. The detective's words hit me like a physical blow. "My mother. She walked into Cedar Ridge Police Station at 11 o'clock last night," the detective explained, helping me sit down on the truck's running board. Sophie clung to me, and Carol hovered nearby, looking shocked by everything unfolding. She was hysterical, could barely speak. She had documents, recordings on her phone, bank statements. She told us everything about your brother's plan. Another officer was reading Derek his rights. My brother stood there handcuffed, his face a twisted mask of rage and defeat. He wouldn't look at me. "Where is she?" I asked. "Where's my mother?" "At the station," giving her full statement. "Your father is there too, though he's not being very coherent. She said he has early-stage dementia, that your brother exploited his condition to manipulate both of them." An ambulance arrived, and paramedics rushed over. One knelt in front of Sophie, checking her vital signs with gentle efficiency. The other examined me, shining a light in my eyes, taking my blood pressure. "They're severely dehydrated and malnourished," the paramedic said. "Possible hypothermia exposure. We need to get them to the hospital immediately." "Wait," I said, grabbing the detective's arm. "Derek hired people. 2 people. A man and a woman in their 50s. They were hunting us in the forest. They had our picture." The detective's expression hardened. "Names? I don't know. But they were using walkie-talkies, and the man reported to someone he called boss. They were near the old fire watchtower yesterday morning." The detective spoke into her radio, relaying the information. Within minutes, she had confirmation. "We picked up 2 suspects this morning trying to leave the area. Carl and Susan Mitchell, private investigators out of Denver with a history of questionable work. They're already in custody. Your brother hired them 3 days ago when he realized you might still be alive. 3 days ago would have been day 7. Derek had been confident we'd be dead within a week, but when we weren't, Head panicked and hired professionals to ensure we never made it out." As they loaded Sophie and me into the ambulance, Carol came over. She took my hand in both of hers. "You're one strong woman, and your daughter, she's special. You both are. Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for calling the police, for standing between us and Derek." "I've got 3 granddaughters about this one's age," Carol said, touching Sophie's cheek gently. "Nobody threatens kids on my watch." They closed the ambulance doors, and we pulled away, sirens blaring. Sophie was on a gurney with an IV in her arm. I sat beside her, holding her hand, watching Cedar Ridge appear in the distance. Civilization. Safety. We'd made it. At the hospital, they separated us briefly for examination. Sophie was admitted for observation due to her dangerous weight loss and the lingering effects of her infection from the contaminated water. She'd lost 12 pounds in 10 days, a terrifying amount for a child her size. I had severe dehydration, multiple infected blisters on my feet, mild hypothermia, and malnutrition. The doctor said if we'd been out there even 2 more days, the outcome might have been very different. Sophie's kidneys were stressed from the dehydration. My body temperature had been dangerously low. We'd come so close to dying. Derek's plan had nearly worked. After they'd treated the immediate concerns and moved Sophie to a regular room, they let me stay with her. She fell asleep almost immediately, her small hand still clutching mine. I sat in the chair beside her bed and let myself cry for the first time since we'd been abandoned. Not tears of fear or desperation, but of relief and release. We'd survived. Against all odds, we'd survived. A nurse brought me soup and bread, and I ate slowly, my stomach protesting the sudden influx of real food. Then the detective from the road came in, accompanied by another officer. "I'm Detective Sarah Martinez," she said, pulling up a chair. "I know you've been through hell, but I need to get your statement while everything is fresh. Can you walk me through what happened, starting from the beginning?" So I told her everything. The camping trip that Derek had organized, insisting it would be good for family bonding. The strange behavior from my parents that last morning. The walk Sophie and I had taken, just 2 hours, up to a scenic overlook and back, returning to find everything and everyone gone. I showed her the note my mother had written, which I'd kept folded in my pocket all this time. I showed her the screenshot of Derek's text message. I pulled out the torn email I'd found in the hunting shelter, now wrinkled and dirty but still legible. Detective Martinez photographed everything. "This is solid evidence," she said. "Combined with your mother's confession and the testimony from the private investigators we arrested, we have a strong case against your brother. Hess being charged with 2 counts of attempted murder, conspiracy to commit murder, fraud, and several other charges. Hess not getting out on bail." "What about my mother?" I asked, the question I'd been dreading. "Will she be charged?" Detective Martinez's expression softened. "That's complicated. She claims your brother manipulated her, used your father's dementia to convince them both that this was somehow for your own good, that you needed tough love to become independent. She says she didn't understand the full extent of the plan until it was too late, and when she realized what had really happened, she couldn't live with the guilt. Do you believe her? I believe she made a terrible choice under manipulation and then made the right choice in the end. The district attorney will decide whether to file charges, but Margaret, you should know. Your mother is the reason we found you when we did. She gave us everything. Without her confession, Derek might have gotten away with this. I didn't know how to feel about that. Grateful? Angry? Both? My mother had participated in abandoning us to die, but Shed also saved our lives by coming forward. How do you reconcile those two truths? Can I see her? I asked. Tomorrow, when you're stronger. She's desperate to see you and Sophie, but she understands if you're not ready. After Detective Martinez left, I sat in the quiet hospital room, listening to Sophie's steady breathing, and thought about everything that had led to this moment. My divorce from Jason 18 months ago, losing my job at the marketing firm 3 months ago when they downsized, moving back in with my parents, something I'd sworn I'd never do as an adult, but I'd had no choice. Sophie needed stability, and I needed time to figure out our next steps. Derek had seen opportunity in my vulnerability. Had discovered the life insurance policy, probably by going through my paperwork when I wasn't home. Had figured out that with me out of the way and Sophie as a minor without a surviving parent, he could position himself as her guardian and control that money. $500,000, plus whatever Had eventually inherit from our parents' estate, which he wouldn't have to share with me, plus had been embezzling from the family business, according to what Detective Martinez had said. He was in deep financial trouble and saw murdering his sister as the solution. The worst part? Had almost succeeded. If not for the random supplies Wed found in that hunting shelter, if not for the old map in the fire tower, if not for my mother's confession, Sophie and I would be dead. Our bodies might never have been found. Derek would have collected the money, played the grieving brother, and gotten away with it. A nurse came in to check Sophie's vitals around midnight. You should try to sleep too, she said kindly. Your body needs rest to heal. But I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I was back in the forest, hearing the vehicles drive away, seeing those taillights disappear. The trauma was going to take a long time to process. Around 2 a.m, my phone, which the hospital staff had charged for me, buzzed with a notification. My banking app. I opened it out of habit and froze. Someone had tried to access my account 5 times in the past hour. Failed login attempts, the app said. I checked my email next and found dozens of password reset requests for various accounts. My bank, my credit cards, my investment account where I kept Sophie's college fund, Derek, or someone working with him. Even from jail, he was still trying to get to my money, trying to cause damage. I immediately called the hospital security, who connected me with Detective Martinez. She sounded tired but alert. I'll have the cybercrimes unit look into it. It's probably Derek's wife, Amanda. We haven't arrested her yet because we're still building the case against her. But she's under surveillance. She was part of this. Your mother's statement indicates Amanda knew everything. She and Derek planned it together. She's the one who changed your insurance beneficiary form using forged documents. She worked for an insurance company before becoming a stay-at-home mother, had the inside knowledge to pull it off. Amanda, Derek's wife of 12 years, the woman who'd been at my wedding, who'd attended Sophie's birthday parties, who'd acted like family. Shed wanted me dead too. Well, get her, Detective Martinez promised. And well, make sure your accounts are secured. Try to rest, Margaret. You're safe now. But I didn't feel safe. I felt raw and exposed, like the whole world had revealed itself to be hostile and dangerous. I'd lost my marriage, my job, my home, and now I'd nearly lost my life and my daughter. What did I have left to hold on to? I looked at Sophie sleeping peacefully in the hospital bed, her chest rising and falling steadily. I had her. I had my daughter, alive and safe. That was everything. And I had something else too. I had the truth. I had evidence. I had survived. Derek had tried to erase me, and I'd refused to be erased. That had to count for something. The next morning, Sophie woke up looking more like herself. The color had returned to her cheeks and her eyes were clearer. The hospital breakfast tray arrived, and she ate scrambled eggs and toast with an appetite that made the nurse smile. "Look at you bouncing back," the nurse said. "Kids are resilient," but I could see the shadows in Sophie's eyes that hadn't been there before. She was quieter than usual, more watchful. She kept touching me as if to make sure I was real, that I wasn't going to disappear. The trauma counselor came by mid-morning. A warm woman named Dr. Patricia Hayes. She spoke with both of us, but focused mainly on Sophie, using gentle questions and drawing exercises to help Sophie process what had happened. "It's normal to feel scared, even now that you're safe," Dr. Hayes told Sophie. "Your brain learned that the world can be dangerous, and it's going to take time for it to learn to feel safe again. But you will feel safe again, I promise. And your mom is going to be right here with you the whole time." After Dr. Hayes left, Detective Martinez returned. "Your mother is here. She's in a conference room downstairs. Are you ready to see her, or would you prefer to wait?" I looked at Sophie. "What do you think, sweetie? Do you want to see Grandma?" Sophie's face crumpled. "I don't know. Why did she leave us, Mom?" "I don't know either. But maybe we should let her explain. We don't have to forgive her, but we can listen." "Okay," Sophie nodded hesitantly. They brought my mother up to the room rather than making us go down. When she walked through the door, I barely recognized her. She'd aged 10 years in 10 days. Her face was haggard, her eyes red and swollen from crying. She looked broken. "Margaret," she whispered, stopping just inside the doorway. "Sophie, oh God, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." She started crying, these horrible, wrenching sobs. Part of me wanted to comfort her. The little girl inside me who still remembered my mother as the one who kissed, scraped knees, and chased away nightmares wanted to say it was okay. But it wasn't okay. "Why?" I asked simply. "Why did you do it?" My mother collapsed into a chair, wiping at her face with shaking hands. "Derek told us you were planning to have your father declared incompetent. He showed us forged documents that looked like you'd consulted with lawyers about taking over the business, about putting Dad in a facility. He said you were going to take everything from us, that you'd always been selfish, but now you were becoming dangerous." I stared at her in disbelief. "And you believed him? You believed I would do that?" "Your father believed him first," she said miserably. "His mind isn't what it was, and Derek exploited that. He'd tell Dad these stories about things you'd supposedly said or done, and Dad would get so upset. Then Derek would show me how upset Dad was and say we needed to protect him from you. So you decided to murder me?" "No." My mother looked horrified. "No. Derek said we were just going to give you a wake-up call. He said we'd drive away and scare you a little, make you realize how much you depended on us, then come back in a few hours. He said it would teach you independence and gratitude." "A wake-up call," I repeated flatly. "In October, in the mountains, 40 miles from civilization, with a 10-year-old child and no supplies. I know how it sounds now. I know. But Derek was so convincing, and I wasn't thinking clearly. I was so worried about your father, so stressed about the business losing money, so confused about everything. Derek made it all seem reasonable, like it was for your own good." "You wrote that note," I said. "You told me to trust you." My mother started crying again. "I thought we'd be back before you even found it. I thought it would all be over so quickly. But then we got back to town and Derek kept making excuses about why we couldn't go back yet. First it was that the truck needed gas, then that he had to make a business call, then that we should wait until morning. By nightfall, I realized something was very wrong. I tried to get your father to drive back with me, but he was confused and Derek had convinced him we needed to stay away." "When did you figure out the truth?" Detective Martinez asked from her position by the door. "The second day. I snuck into Derek's office while he was sleeping and found printouts about Margaret's life insurance policy. I found emails to those private investigators. I found a notebook where He'd written out his entire plan, including timelines for when Margaret would likely die of exposure and when he could file to have her declared legally dead." My mother's voice broke. "He was counting on my daughter dying. He had it all planned out, and I'd helped him do it. I'd driven away and left you there. Why didn't you go to the police immediately?" Detective Martinez pressed. "I tried. I got in my car and started driving to the police station, but Derek followed me. He ran me off the road, not badly enough to cause an accident but enough to scare me. He told me if I said anything, he'd say it was all my idea, that I was the mastermind. and had been trying to protect Margaret all along. He'd make sure I went to prison and that Dad would die alone in a state facility. She looked at me with devastated eyes. I was a coward. I was too scared of Derek, too scared of what I'd done. I went home and tried to pretend everything was normal. But I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw your face. On day 9, I couldn't take it anymore. I waited until Derek left the house, packed up all the evidence I'd found, and drove straight to the police station. I confessed everything. I didn't care what happened to me anymore. I just needed you to be found. Silence filled the room. Sophie had been listening to everything, her young face serious and sad. You made a terrible choice, I finally said. You believed lies about me. Your own daughter. You participated in something that almost killed Sophie and me. I don't know if I can forgive that. I don't expect you to forgive me. My mother whispered. I don't forgive myself. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I love you, and that I will spend the rest of my life trying to make this right. How is Dad? I asked, changing the subject because I couldn't handle any more of this emotional weight right now. Not good. Hez very confused. The doctors say the stress has accelerated his decline. He keeps asking for you, but he doesn't really understand what happened. Sometimes he thinks you're still a little girl. Sometimes he doesn't know who Derek is. Does he know what Derek did? I don't think he can fully grasp it. But in his lucid moments, he cries. He says he's sorry. He says he should have protected you. I felt tears on my face and wiped them away impatiently. I didn't want to cry anymore. I didn't want to feel sad for my father who'd driven away and left me to die, even if had been manipulated into it. Detective Martinez stepped forward. Mrs. Thompson, we need to finish your statement. Margaret needs to rest. My mother stood up slowly. She looked at Sophie. Baby girl, Grandma loves you so much. I'm so sorry you had to go through something so scary. Sophie didn't respond, just pressed closer to me. My mother's face crumpled again, but she didn't push. She just nodded and left with the detective. After they were gone, Sophie said quietly, Is Grandma going to jail too? I don't know, sweetie. Maybe. She did something very wrong, even if Uncle Derek tricked her into it. Good, Sophie said with unexpected fierceness. She should go to jail. She left us there. She's supposed to protect us, and she didn't. My daughter was right. Whatever the reasons, whatever the manipulations, my mother had made a choice to participate in abandoning us. There had to be consequences for that. Over the next few days, as Sophie and I recovered in the hospital, the full extent of Derek's plan came to light. The district attorney visited to explain what they'd uncovered. Derek had been embezzling from our family's construction business for over 2 years, nearly $300,000. Had been living beyond his means, buying expensive cars and taking lavish vacations. When our father started noticing discrepancies in the books, Derek panicked. Had discovered my life insurance policy by breaking into my laptop while I was living with our parents. Had Amanda use her insurance industry connections to create forged documents changing the beneficiary structure. The plan was to kill me, wait 6 months, have Sophie declared an orphan with Derek as her guardian, and collect the $500,000. That plus whatever He'd eventually inherit from our parents' estate would cover his embezzlement and let him continue his lifestyle. Amanda was arrested on day 11. The district attorney said she'd been fully complicit, had helped plan every detail. Their 2 children, my niece and nephew, were placed temporarily with Amanda's sister while the case proceeded. My mother was charged with conspiracy and child endangerment but was offered a plea deal in exchange for her testimony against Derek. She'd likely serve probation rather than prison time, given her cooperation and the evidence that Derek had manipulated her. My father was deemed incompetent to stand trial due to his dementia and was placed in a memory care facility. 3 weeks after our rescue, Derek's trial began. I had to testify, walking the jury through every horrible moment of those 10 days. Sophie was spared from testifying due to her age, but her medical records and the child psychologist's reports were entered as evidence. The hardest part was sitting there in the courtroom looking at my brother. Derek showed no remorse. He stared at me with cold hatred, like I'd wronged him by surviving, by ruining his plan. Even when the guilty verdicts came back on all counts, his face remained hard and angry. The judge sentenced him to 25 years in prison without the possibility of parole for 15 years. Amanda received 10 years. The private investigators who'd hunted us in the forest each got 5 years for conspiracy to commit murder. Justice was served, at least in the legal sense. 3 months after the trial ended, Sophie and I moved into a small apartment in Boulder, 2 hours from Cedar Ridge. I needed distance from everything that had happened. A fresh start where nobody knew our story. I'd used some of my savings to secure the apartment and put down roots. I also received a settlement from the insurance company after they discovered Amanda's fraud. They were liable for allowing the beneficiary change without proper verification, so they paid out damages that gave Sophie and me financial stability for the first time in years. I found a job with a small marketing agency that specialized in outdoor recreation brands. Ironic, given what I'd been through. But I was good at my work, and they appreciated my dedication. More importantly, they were flexible when I needed to leave early for Sophie's therapy appointments, or when I had my own counseling sessions, because we both needed therapy. What Derek had done to us left scars that couldn't be seen but ran deep. Sophie had nightmares about being abandoned in the forest. She developed separation anxiety, panicking whenever I was out of her sight for more than a few minutes. Dr. Hayes, who continued working with us, said it was normal. That trust had been fundamentally broken and would take time to rebuild. I had my own struggles. I'd developed hypervigilance, always scanning for threats, unable to relax even in safe situations. I had trust issues that made forming new relationships nearly impossible. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night convinced I was back in the forest, that the apartment walls were actually trees, that Sophie and I were still fighting for survival. But slowly, week by week, we healed. Sophie's nightmares became less frequent. My panic attacks became manageable. We learned to live with what had happened while not letting it define us. My mother tried to maintain contact. She called once a week, sent cards for every holiday, asked repeatedly if she could visit. I hadn't decided yet whether to allow that. The betrayal was still too raw, too painful. Dr. Hayes said I needed to process my feelings at my own pace, that forgiveness wasn't something I owed anyone, even my mother. I did visit my father once, at the memory care facility. He didn't recognize me. He called me by my mother's name and asked if I'd brought him lunch. The director said he had good days and bad days, but mostly bad days now. The stress and guilt of what happened had accelerated his decline dramatically. I felt sad looking at this confused old man, who'd once taught me to ride a bike and helped me with my math homework. But I also felt angry at him for not protecting me, for believing Derek's lies, for being weak when I needed him to be strong. Maybe someday I'd find peace with those conflicting emotions. Not yet, though. Carol, the truck driver who'd witnessed Derek's confrontation with us on the road, stayed in touch. She called every few weeks to check on Sophie and me. She sent Sophie books and little gifts for no reason. She became like an aunt, family wed chosen rather than family wed been born into. That meant something. It meant family wasn't just about blood. It was about who showed up when things got hard, who stood by you when the world fell apart, who chose to love you even when they didn't have to. 6 months after we moved to Boulder, I received a letter from Derek. Had been moved to a federal prison in Texas, far enough away that I didn't have to worry about accidentally running into anyone connected to him. The letter was handwritten, several pages long. I almost threw it away without reading it, but curiosity won out. He didn't apologize. Instead, he blamed me for everything that had gone wrong in his life. I'd been the favorite child, he wrote. I'd gotten more attention, more love, more opportunities. Had always been in my shadow, always compared to me, and found lacking. When I lost my job and had to move back home, it was the last straw. I was taking what little he had left, his inheritance, his parents, time, and energy. The life insurance money would have solved all his problems, he wrote. It would have let him pay back what Head borrowed from the business, give his kids a good life, prove to everyone that he was successful. It ruined all of that by refusing to die. I read the letter twice, then burned it in the kitchen sink. Derek would never take responsibility for his choices. He'd always be the victim in his own mind, always believe the world owed him something it had given to me instead. I felt sorry for him in a distant way, the same way you might feel sorry for any broken person whose pain had twisted them into something monstrous. But I didn't forgive him. I didn't think I ever would. Sophie's 11th birthday came in April, 7 months after our ordeal in the forest. I threw her a small party at our apartment with 3 friends from her new school. We played games, ate cake, and watched a movie. Normal things, safe things. Before bed that night, Sophie asked me something she hadn't asked before. Mom, do you think we'll ever be okay? Really okay, like we were before. I thought about how to answer honestly without crushing her hope. I don't think we'll ever be exactly who we were before. What happened changed us. But I think we'll be okay in a new way. Stronger. Maybe. More careful about who we trust. But also more grateful for the people who prove they deserve that trust. Like Carol. Like Carol. And Dr. Hayes. And your friends from school who don't know what happened but care about you anyway. We're building a new life, sweetie. It's different from the old one, but it's still good. It can still be happy. Sophie nodded, processing this. I'm glad we didn't die in the forest. Me too, baby. Me too. A year after our rescue, I was invited to speak at a survivors support group in Denver. The group focused on people who'd experienced violence from family members, a surprisingly large community of people who understood what it meant to be betrayed by those who were supposed to love you most. I almost declined the invitation. I didn't want to tell our story again, didn't want to relive those 10 days of terror and desperation. But Dr. Hayes encouraged me to consider it. She said sharing my experience might help both me and others who were struggling with similar trauma. So I went. Sophie came with me, sitting in the audience with Dr. Hayes while I stood at the front of the room facing 30 people who'd all been hurt by family in different ways. I told them everything. The camping trip, the abandonment, the note, the desperate struggle to survive. Finding out my brother wanted me dead for money. The moment Derek was arrested. The trial. The aftermath. Then I told them what I'd learned. I learned that survival isn't just about staying alive physically. I said, my voice steady despite the emotion behind it. It's about choosing, every single day, not to let the people who hurt you turn you into someone bitter and broken. My brother wanted me dead. Instead, I'm more alive than I've ever been. I looked at Sophie, who smiled at me with fierce pride. I have my daughter, safe and healing. I have the truth about who my brother really is, and who my parents became under his manipulation. I have knowledge that even in the darkest wilderness, literal or emotional, we have the power to find our way home. The people who tried to destroy us are in prison. We are free. That's not luck. That's justice. That's what happens when you refuse to die. I paused, gathering my thoughts. The hardest lesson was about family. I had to accept that the family I was born into failed me in the worst possible way. My brother tried to murder me. My parents participated in abandoning me and my child. Those are facts I can't change or wish away. But I also learned that family isn't just blood. It's the truck driver who stood between me and my violent brother. It's the detective who believed me. It's the therapist who's helped my daughter and me rebuild our sense of safety. It's the friends who've stood by us without judgment. That's real family. People who choose to love and protect you, not because they're obligated to, but because they want to. Someone in the audience raised their hand. How did you forgive your mother? I haven't. I said honestly. I don't know if I ever will. Fully. She made a choice that nearly cost my daughter and me our lives. The fact that she was manipulated doesn't erase the harm she caused. What I've done is accept that she's human and flawed and made a terrible mistake, and that her coming forward saved us. I can hold both of those truths at the same time, without resolving them into neat forgiveness. Another person asked, what do you say to your daughter when she asks why her uncle did this? I tell her the truth in age-appropriate ways. Some people value money and status more than love and family. Some people's pain makes them hurt others rather than seeking help for themselves. Her uncle made choices that came from greed and resentment, and those choices have consequences. She doesn't have to understand or forgive, she just has to know it wasn't her fault, and it wasn't my fault. Sometimes people we love turn out to be people we can't trust, and that's painful, but it's not a reflection on us. After the talk, several people came up to thank me. One woman, maybe in her 50s, gripped my hand tightly. My brother tried to kill me too, she said. Different circumstances, but same result. I survived, he's in prison, and I've spent 10 years feeling guilty for somehow causing his behavior. Hearing you say it's not our fault, that's the first time I've really believed it. I hugged her. We were members of a club nobody wanted to join, bonded by the terrible things our families had done to us and the strength it took to survive them. On the drive home, Sophie was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Mom, you're really brave." "We both are," I corrected. "You walked through that forest with me. You stayed strong when things were scary. You trusted me to keep us safe. That's brave too. I want to be like you when I grow up." I glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean?" "Strong like you. Not scared of anything." "Oh, sweetie. I'm scared of lots of things. I'm scared every time you're out of my sight. I'm scared when the phone rings unexpectedly. I'm scared of trusting the wrong people again. Being strong doesn't mean not being scared. It means doing what you need to do even when you're terrified." Sophie thought about this. "Then I already am like you. Because I'm scared lots of times, but I do things anyway." "Yes, you do, and I'm so proud of you." That night, after Sophie was asleep, I sat on our small balcony looking at the stars and thought about everything we'd been through and everything we'd become. A year ago, I'd been divorced, jobless, living with my parents, unsure of my future. Then I'd been abandoned in the wilderness to die. My family's betrayal nearly destroying me and my daughter. Now I was employed, independent, raising Sophie in our own space. I had a small circle of real friends. I had purpose and direction. I had survived something that should have killed me, and that survival had taught me what I was truly capable of. Derek had wanted to erase me from existence. Instead, had forged me into someone stronger than I'd been before. Someone who knew her own worth, who wouldn't tolerate being treated as expendable, who would fight for her daughter and herself no matter the odds. The greatest revenge wasn't hating him or seeking to hurt him in return. It was living well, being happy, raising Sophie to be healthy and whole. It was choosing love over hate, forgiveness over bitterness where appropriate, and hope over despair. I thought about what I'd say to anyone facing similar betrayal and trauma. I'd tell them it's okay to not be okay for a while. It's okay to be angry and hurt and confused. It's okay to cut toxic people out of your life, even if they're family. It's okay to take time to heal and to do that healing at your own pace. But I'd also tell them that survival is possible. Healing is possible. Joy and peace and safety are possible again, even when it feels like they're gone forever. You just have to refuse to let the people who hurt you have the final word in your story. Sophie and I were writing our own ending now. And it was a happy one, not because everything was perfect or because we'd forgotten what happened, but because we'd chosen to build something good from the ashes of betrayal. We were more than survivors. We were warriors who'd walked through fire and come out transformed. And that, I realized, was the deepest lesson of all. You can't control what others do to you. You can only control how you respond, what you build from the ruins, who you choose to become. Derek tried to make me a victim. I chose to become a victor instead. Before I went to bed, I checked on Sophie one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, no nightmares tonight. Her face relaxed and young in the moonlight streaming through her window. I kissed her forehead gently and whispered, "We made it, baby. We made it all the way home. And home wasn't the place we'd been before. It wasn't my parents' house or even this apartment. Home was the safety Sophie and I had built together. The trust we'd maintained even when the world tried to break it. The love between mother and daughter that had survived the worst betrayal and emerged unshaken. That was a home nobody could take away from us. That was our victory. That was our happy ending. So let me ask you something. Have you ever had someone you trusted betray you in a way that changed your life forever? How did you find the strength to move forward? I'd love to hear your story in the comments below. Your experience might help someone else who's struggling right now. And if this story moved you, if it gave you hope or made you think about resilience and survival in a new way, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to stay connected to more stories about real people overcoming impossible odds. Thank you for listening to my story, for witnessing what Sophie and I went through, and for being part of our journey toward healing. Remember, no matter how dark the wilderness you're facing, there's always a way forward. You're stronger than you know, and you deserve to survive and thrive. May you find your way home, wherever that home may be. May you surround yourself with people who choose to love and protect you, and may you never give up, no matter how impossible survival seems. We're all just walking each other home. Thanks for walking with us today.